What I have here today is a thermostat. Now, this is a typical thermostat. This is a little bit of an older model. A lot of the newer ones come with a housing built around them. But basically, they haven't changed almost since the beginning. Right? We have a metal frame of some sort, which encompasses a valve. Right? There's a spring here. If you look, you can see the spring, a coil spring. Inside the coil spring, we have this brass part here, right? And if you look on the bottom of it here, it has the temperature. This happens to be a 195 degree thermostat. So at 195 degree thermostat, at 195 degrees rather, this thermostat will open. And what does that mean, open? Well, what it is a valve, right? And here we have this disc, and when we get to 195 degrees, right, that disc retracts and opens up the inside of the thermostat and allows the water to come through. So what I've done is I've taken it apart so we can see the component parts and we can see how it's made. Right? So we start with the frame. Right? You can see how this is what holds everything together. It's a little cage, right? Inside the cage, of course, first we have the spring. And this is just a regular coil spring. There's nothing special about it, right? Then we have the disc. This disc is actually the valve, right? You can see, right? Just a disc, and it fits inside here, inside the thermostat housing, and it'll close the housing off when it's pushed against the seat inside the housing. And what does the pushing? What moves this disc back and forth? Well, what does that? What is the engine of the thermostat is this part right here. This brass part here, right? This is what they call the wax pellet. All right, it has really two pieces. That's the wax pellet, and this little rod here, this is a little piston in here that does the pushing. All right? So what's inside here that makes this work? Well, I've taken one and I've cut it open for you so that you could see what makes it work. What we have in here is we have a copper or a brass, right, cylinder. And inside it is wax, right? And inside the wax, this black part here is rubber or flexible plastic. What happens is the temperature increases around the wax pellet, right around this cylinder, right? Heats the copper to brass, right? The wax starts to expand. As it expands, right, it pushes up on this black plastic, which pushes this rod right out the top of the what they call the wax pellet, out the top of the cylinder of this apparatus, right? And when that pushes up, it pushes against the top of the thermostat, right? Rod pushes in here, pushes against the top of the thermostat right here, right? When it pushes against that, it can't move, so it forces that cylinder, forces that wax pellet down, right? And that wax pellet fits inside this steel ring, and when it pushes down, it pushes the steel ring off the seat, which opens the valve. So here we have it all together. Here's our coil spring. Here's our wax pellet. We can see the top of it here. Here's our steel disc, and there's that little rod. And as we heat it, right, we push that down, that wax pellet will heat, will push that rod up, which correspondingly pushes that metal disc down, which opens and closes the thermostat. Very simple device, right? Remained relatively unchanged, probably in close to 100 years. Right, the very few components. Like I said, in a modern one, sometimes they're built into a housing already. You have to buy it all assembled. But inside it incorporates the same components. Very simple, all based on the wax expanding and pushing the rod out of the top, right, of the cylinder. Right, and as it pushes this rod up, that pushes against the housing, which pushes this down, which makes it all work. Right, and here's our wax, right, they call this the wax pellet. Right, and here's our little plastic rubber liner in there, which seals it so that we get movement out of the rod. And that's what makes the thermostat work.